Hi, everyone. Welcome to A New View. I'm Shira, and I'm here with Kim, Lee, and Juji. We are four friends, speakers, and professionals from different cultures, backgrounds, and age groups coming together to offer healing and inspiration. So y'all know that I love quotes, and I think most people have heard this one. Resentment is like drinking poison, expecting the other person to die. So I know I've drunk a lot of poison in my lifetime. How about you guys?
For sure.
I guess I agree. Yes, I've drank a lot of poison, but I feel like there's two categories of resentment. There's the resentment that you hold towards one particular person. And then there's like this overarching resentment towards either a group of people or like it's not even a group of people. It's like an overall resentment of life. Like, oh, everybody just has it easier than me. And I just lived in this story that like life is not fair and everybody else gets it handed to them on a silver platter and I'm the only one struggling. So it wasn't like it was a really convenient resentment that just kind of created this wall between myself and everybody else. And I think this got really kicked into high gear when I started my first business, because of course, I was looking on social media all the time and I was comparing myself to other business owners who had similar businesses to mine. I owned a beauty studio in Manhattan. And so every single time I would perceive that somebody else was succeeding where I felt I was failing, I had this deep resentment like, oh, it's because things just come easier to those people. Oh, because they were well connected. Oh, because they were born into that family. Oh, it must be so great for mommy and daddy to be like, paying for your life, all of these kinds of overarching sort of like, it does, looking back, feel like just poison in my body of like, how can you go through life just assuming that everybody else is having a great time and having it easy and you're the only one suffering. So,
But Juji, is that more like, I guess, is it more jealousy that like embeds itself and becomes resentment? Because it sounds like there's jealousy involved in there too.
I would say so, but I feel like resentment is like the umbrella under which so many other things live. Jealousy is one of them. I feel like a lot for me harkens back to just feeling inadequate, that there was something that other people knew that I didn't know, but also that was like at that time was kind of the crescendo of social media and what we call the highlight reel.
Yeah.
People have become a lot more forthcoming about their process, their anxieties, it was this moment in time in like 2015 and 16 where literally it was all about like the beach photos and the success stories and the 30 under 30 and this celebration of the hustle and the girl boss and all of that really just, it was this bomb of being bombarded with success everywhere and everybody's having a better time than you and all of that stuff. It's really mellowed out, or maybe I just unfollowed a lot of people. I don't know, but and I've also taken care of my mental health, right? Like if I start to feel anxious when I'm on social media, I know it's time to take a break and I know it's time to check in with myself and feel like, where can I really, what button is this pushing for me now? Whereas before I believed everything that I saw and I was just resentful overall that everybody was having a perfect life but me.
So interesting. And I think that we can all relate to that, that feeling of everyone else has it going on, whether it's family, relationship, success in business, whatever. But I think we're also at a point today where if you would all agree that we know so much of it is not true. And what we are feeling, so many other people are feeling, although we all put on this mask and we all pretend. And I think a lot of these feelings, for me now that, when I look back a lot at all of these different times in my life about resentment and or these just negative feelings, a lot of it really, and today what I automatically try to do or be aware of is that it's a reflection on me. And just like you said, Juji, it's like you go back to yourself, and start to explore that and start to dig in a little bit deeper and figure out why you're feeling this way. What is triggering you and why, and this is where we can begin to do more work to heal ourselves. And, the idea also obviously is to have less resentment. What is this resentment about, and I would almost classify it as self-resentment, that it's a loathing of ourselves with certain things that we do or say or think. And this is where the focus needs to start to get internal.
Mm.
Yeah,
And,
I mean, yeah, go ahead, Kim.
Okay. I'm about to do this whole dance with you. No, I was just going to say, and there's this like holding on to that's unhealthy. I think we've all seen it. We've all experienced it where you have resentment, and usually, just listening to you, I could see like a bitterness or an anger because of this perceived unfairness. And it was so clear to me listening to you. And it's the holding on to that we want to let go of, because if we hold on to those emotions, the negative anger, bitterness, jealousy, whatever it is, it manifests into dis-ease in some way, shape, or form, or it could just have this really negative impact on all your relationships. We have to let it go. We have to find a way to release it. I have someone in my life a family member who I find she'll bring up the past a lot, and she feels very wronged, and things will come up years later. And that to me is just such a clear indicator that there's holding on to, like she's holding on to this unfairness that happened in her life. And, she's always having medical issues. She's always having conflict. So it's coming out in all these different ways. I could physically see it. And that's a good reminder for me, because one thing that I've realized from like my biggest resentment in my whole life when I was thinking about this episode is the skin condition that I deal with, the ups and downs of psoriasis. I held on to resentment for so many years, like 20 years, about my own skin, because it was so unfair that this is happening to me. Like that was somewhere deep in my cross, somewhere on a cellular level. And I really believe it just manifested more psoriasis on my skin, because all those negative emotions are toxic, and the toxins have to come out somewhere. And they were coming out to communicate to me that something had to change. It's like I had to forgive myself for feeling those things, and I had to offer myself love in new ways. I still need to do this. I still find myself needing to come up with new ways to practice self-care and love myself. And, it's the work, right? But it's very important to let go, and to, if you can see it, if you can see, wow, I'm really holding on to this. I mentioned this again, or, why does this still trigger me till this day? That happened 10 years ago. Like, it's just important awareness. We always come back to awareness.
Always. And it's amazing. It's amazing to me. It really, it's so hard to wrap my mind around the fact that we really do hold on. It could be an incident, an experience that happened 20, 30, 40 years ago that can still come up in our lives. and impact us in such a huge way that everyone should do the work.
Yeah,
Everyone should be at some level of doing the work or wanting to.
That's a wrap. We're done.
do the work, mic drop, we're out. No, I just want to say that, it's very, and not to diminish anything that's been said, but the whole, we have to let it go, the toxins build up, like it's so much easier said than done. It really is. And sometimes, like for me, that quote, resentment is like drinking poison, expecting the other person to die, almost came to me, or I read it exactly when I needed to hear it, because I carried around the heaviest bag of resentment with my mom. And it was mostly through my teenage and early adult life that I can look back now and see how heavy it was for me. It was such a heavy load. I couldn't even look at her. I just was so angry that, it's like, listen, when you grow up with like the Brady Bunch and, I was going to mention a couple other shows, but they're not relevant, but just shows where it's just like, oh, we have a problem and it's solved in half an hour and all is well with the world. And it's like, I didn't realize until later on that not everybody processes things the way you do. And some people have more mental health difficulty than you do. So really, when I was able to cultivate more compassion toward my mother, which did not happen until my mid 30s to late 30s, that I even started to think about that. I realize now that she's my mother. She's my mother. She gave birth to me. She raised me. She did the best she could. But when you're a teenager and you're a young adult, you don't care about those things. You just want your mom to like be there for you and do the things that other moms that you see, you were just talking about comparison, like, oh my God, I compared the crap out of things when it came to moms. And I think that's probably what drove me to do some work with mothers and daughters, because I had my own healing to do. And it's not like I would take it all back and do it differently if I could. Like we all know, it's a process. And I'm just grateful that I came to certain realizations that I did when I did, because it really will slowly like eke away at you. And I've even worked through issues, raising my own children, it's not easy. But it's like this heaviness that just sits wherever it sits, it could be here, it could be in your stomach. And I just remember just feeling so uneasy and so wanting it to be different than what it was. Instead of like, we're talking about like, you don't have the wherewithal when you're 16 years old to go, I'm going to do the work. But you kind of should, because you're practically an adult in your late teenage years. Like, that's why I feel this show can help younger people as well, because it's like everybody says, like, if I knew then what I know now, you could save yourself, years of heartbreak and heartache and dis-ease, like you said, Kim.
Well, everyone has to go through their journeys too. Like there's so much that we're not aware of at some point in our lives. And then as we grow and as we go through life and we have relationships and we have jobs and we go through all these experiences in life, we're going to get to a point, hopefully, where we see how these emotions are affecting us. And it's our choice to do something about it. It's our choice to look at it in the face. And I really hope that that's a choice. I want everybody on the planet to make that choice. When Juji and I, and actually I think all of us pretty much took, if not the program Landmark, a program like Landmark. And I was in my late 30s taking Landmark, and I never even knew that I had resentment from my dad, from just all of the times he put our family at risk, gambling, drinking, drove my mother crazy. Like there were so many issues with my parents, and I'm sure we all have issues with our parents where we have some sort of resentment deep down that we may not even be aware of for years and years and years. But I have to say, the one thing that I loved about Landmark is that it really helped me express all this to my dad, because in the expression and talking to him about it is what helped me forgive him. It's what helped me understand it. Like you can't really, anything that, resentment, all those emotions, you can't really do anything until you have an understanding of like, where did it come from? Why do you feel this way? And then to actually talk about it with the person wow, it is incredibly healing. It really can shift everything inside of you. Your whole perspective could be shifted. And then that person could pass away and you could look at them like with a whole new, fresh, clean, healthy, outlook. And like, it's amazing the transformation that I feel with my dad, just from having a conversation with him about how I felt.
Yeah.
Talking
just
is
wanted to-
everything, right?
I just wanted to add one more thing to what I said. First of all, Mom, I love you so much. You're my mom. I love you. I also wanted to say that I realize now that carrying that resentment for me was just a lot of self-righteousness. It was self-righteous. It was holier than thou, very judgmental. Like I see that now, that I was carrying around this like, no, you should be this way because I'm this way and I'm, I have it figured out and like I know what's right and wrong and you should be this. And just it's very external, like judging the world from on high, when really, hello, just bring yourself down a couple of pegs and ask yourself some questions like, is this serving you? Like the compassion piece of it. That whole self-righteousness, holier than thou thing, I feel like I embodied that to some degree. And for people listening to this who know me, like, what, Sherry, you're not like that. But in my mind, I was absolutely judging every move. And I have to say that also carried somewhat into my later adult years when I didn't realize sort of what was happening in my marriage. I had a tremendous amount of resentment in my marriage. But it's like if you really want the answers and you really ask the questions, the wisdom will come eventually. And it's a never ending journey. This learning.
Yeah,
we
for
do.
sure.
And letting go. Oh, go ahead, Juice.
Well, I was going to say, I feel like Kim, you said you had this healing conversation because you were able to finally express or have words for exactly what it was that you went through. And it's really like beautiful to allow somebody to witness that. But it's also, I feel like one of the ways that I let go of resentment is that I just took my resentment goggles off. And then the communication became so on such a different level because I was able to ask questions. I was actually able to hear what the other person had to say, because even though it may have been very clear to me that this other person was harming me, I can see how it came from a place of good intention. I could see how it actually affected them as well. Like when I had this similar healing conversation with my dad, it was like I was meeting him for the first time. It was like, who is this person when I'm not wearing these goggles that say, this is a bad person, this is a maniacal person, this is a person who's hurt, who set out to hurt. When I could take those goggles off and just relate to him on like a human level, it was a super different conversation and experience altogether. And that was the healing part of it, of like, of course I feel resentment towards everybody else because in my life, I have seen everything through the lens of people are out to get me, or like life is out to get me. And it starts with the closest ones to you.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I like that metaphor of the goggles, Juji. For me, I think it wasn't as much like everyone's out to get me, but I was the victim of everything that was happening in my life. And I too remember all these times, when I think back at my childhood and in my teen years and even 20s, like a lot of heaviness also, so much heaviness that when I think about it today, I'm like, gosh, now I know not only do I choose to do the work and stay in the work, but when I'm doing this work, and this work that we're talking about is discovering ourselves and doing things to make ourselves happier and more satisfied. But it's these choices that we have every day while we are in the work, while we are trying to figure out what it is that triggers us, or why we judge this person, or used to judge so much more, or hate, a friend or a family member. Like, it's today, it very often for me comes down to like, a choice of like, do you want to stay in this place? It's easier. It became more of my go-to, because I started to be more comfortable being in a suffering place. I think that I experienced that for decades. And now, for the last decade or so, like undoing that is a lot of work, a lot of deconditioning, a lot of, being my own advocate. I am my only advocate. I am my only advocate, and I always will be. So, building and creating that best version of myself, that's where this journey has become more satisfying for me and fulfilling, because I get to do that. And it's like the canvas is just in my hands alone.
Wow.
And
That is so beautiful. Oh my God. So
That was
beautiful.
actually very profound, what you just said. I bet you a lot of people are more comfortable in the suffering place.
oh yeah, yeah. And I would never have admitted that years ago. And I first of all, I never would have noticed that. I would have been like, are you kidding me? What are you talking about? This one sucks and that one sucks, and judge everybody and poor me. And it wasn't necessarily jealousy, and it wasn't necessarily, people are out to get me. It was me making me miserable due to my circumstances. Yes. And it's not like life was, a piece of cake, but it certainly wasn't as bad as I lived it.
I just had a little bit of an aha moment also in my like sort of former Shira self. I think that shame and embarrassment has something to do with it also, because I was ashamed of my mother. I mean, I can say it now. I was absolutely ashamed because she didn't understand me, because communication issues, because of the culture gaps, like all of that, there was shame involved. So rather than either have compassion for myself or for her, you just sort of lash out. It's just easier. It's easier to judge and lash out and be resentful. It's just easier. It doesn't serve us. It can cause disease. It can cause mental health issues. It can cause us to hate ourselves and our situation, but we do it. Like somehow we just keep doing it. But when you start uncovering the shame and the embarrassment that's a part of it, you can start like putting the puzzle pieces together. It's a very interesting way to look at it, right? Just have a different perspective.
Absolutely. Totally different goggles.
Yes.
I couldn't agree more with everything you just said. Beautifully said.
Okay. Well, my beauties, I do believe that this is a good place to wrap. If you have enjoyed our conversation, please let us know if you have any topic requests or if you have any ideas by commenting below. We will see you all soon. Thank you so much for watching, and we love you.
Bye.